you're online, we can start.
Yes, we're live. You may go on.
Okay, perfect. So again, welcome everyone on our Creative Campus Open Program lecture. Today we have Zofia Bieńkowska with us, who is an ethnographer, sociologist, and environmentalist. She's a doctoral researcher in Doctoral School of Social Sciences at the University of Warsaw, Poland, communication specialist, and for the Polish Society of the Protection of Birds. She was previously interested in post-memory and transgenerational transmission of trauma of genocide in Armenia, and currently she's researching social aspects of climate change and the Anthropocene. And today she will be giving a lecture on transdisciplinary, research on climate change. So the room is yours, Zofia. Please go on.
Hello, everyone. Thanks a lot for inviting me here today. At the beginning, if for some reason I freeze or something, please excuse me and be patient, because sometimes my internet just fails with no reason. So if that happens, I'm really sorry in advance, but hopefully it will not happen. So let me start with sharing my screen. Oops. Okay, so I was invited here as team member of transdisciplinary team, which has nine members, and you can see them all on my initial slide. And let me introduce you with my plan for today. So at the beginning, I will tell you a few words about the MCLIC project I am a member of, so you know what we do, what are our goals, and why am I going to talk about transdisciplinarity. And then I will go on with what does transdisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity mean, because these terms are usually used interchangeably, but they actually mean different things. Then I move on to opportunities, challenges, and pitfalls of such transdisciplinary work. Then I move on to some more concrete examples from our work. So how the process looked, how we organized our work in transdisciplinary team, and I will give you also some very concrete examples from our work, so you can see what was easier, what was more difficult, and how we overcame those problems. And at the end, I will give you also some summary of what have we learned and if we succeeded with transdisciplinarity in our project. For the introduction, what MCLIC project is, this is abbreviation from Embodying Climate Change, Transdisciplinary Research on Urban Overheating. And we started in 2020, and we have still half a year to go. The research project is funded from the EEA Grants, and you can see on the screen the number of grants. And if you're interested in more details, you can visit our website, mclic.com. Let me tell you a few words about our team. So as I mentioned, we are 9 researchers from various backgrounds. There are 3 anthropologists, sociologists, economists, climate scientists, epidemiologists, environmental engineer, and physicists. So as you can hear, there are qualitative and quantitative scientists in our team. And the project itself is devoted to studying embodying climate change. And in very simple words, embodying means how people's everyday lives are affected by climate change, how their mental and physical health is affected, and also how the climate change is understood by the people. And we chose to study in our project the group of older adults, meaning adults over 65 years old, because we know from other epidemiological studies that these are people mostly vulnerable to heat effects. And I forgot to mention, we study heat because it is one of the most common manifestations of climate change. And if you have any questions, please post them on chat so I can answer them later, because maybe something is unclear. So please do not hesitate to ask. So as for our disciplines and methods, as I showed you, we have 9 team members, and each of us is responsible for different discipline. And in the center of our research are older adults with their experiences, feelings, everyday life, their vulnerability to heat and climate change, and their individual and not only individual adaptation strategies. But we understand experience not as one-directional process, but multi-directional process. So it's not only older adults and their experiences, but the experiences are also shaped by other factors like heat, weather, climate. They are shaped by policy measures, what is done or not being done to adapt to climate change or mitigate climate change. Their experiences are also shaped by their health, their family situation, how the city is designed, the architectural and urban conditions, and many more factors. That is why we, in our project, tried to combine different methods coming from different disciplines. So on micro level, as you can see on our very basic and simple graph we designed for our project. So on the micro level, you have ethnography and the sensor study. Ethnography was conducted by me and meant spending 2 years in a row with chosen group of 10 people, studying their everyday lives and how heat affected their everyday lives in very simple words. I don't have time to elaborate on that. A sensor study meant using sensors that measured humidity and temperature in those chosen people's houses for 2 years. Then on a meso level, we conducted survey for 1,000 people, focus groups, meaning group interviews. And on the macro level, we did a citywide heat mapping using machine learning, epidemiological modeling, demographic modeling, climate modeling, and policy analysis. So as you can see, there is many methods, and sometimes they hardly overlap. Also, during the process, we realized there is much more fields to be covered studying climate change in its experience. So we also had some consultations with experts, the medical doctor and architects from Warsaw and Madrid, because I think I forgot to mention we study these experiences in Warsaw and Madrid. So let me now tell a few words about transdisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity. So what is the difference and what was our goal? So actually there are even 3 terms to describe this process of bridging together different disciplines. And the most common one is multidisciplinarity, which means actually using different data sets and taking data from different sources. And it's also it's the most common in Polish academia, and it's can also be called data triangulation. It's simply multiple sources and methods of gathering data. Then the further step is interdisciplinarity. It's a bit more complex, and it's also recently quite overused. And behind this term, often people mean multidisciplinarity, not interdisciplinarity, because interdisciplinarity should bring some harmony and synthesis between disciplines already. So disciplines should be more coordinated and create more coherent whole. And then transdisciplinarity would mean actually a step further. Actually blending methodologies and disciplines, creating a new entity beyond traditional boundaries of the discipline. And we try to do that. We try to develop a new transdisciplinary methodology within our project, but we realized during the process it is not easy and it requires a lot of time. But let me talk about it later. And now let's jump to the opportunities. Knowing what the program is about and more or less what are your backgrounds, I think I do not need to convince you that interdisciplinarity or transdisciplinarity is important, but I will try to quickly sum up what are opportunities created by such work. So first of all, it enables you to bring various perspectives from various levels, as I mentioned, from individual level of work with older adults and macro level of climate modeling, climate perspective, climate epidemiological perspective. Then you have higher chances of resolving real life problems in their complexity, because as I mentioned, climate change is a complex phenomenon. It touches many areas of life like health, mental health, policy, and weather, climate in its physical form. So studying it only by one method would mean losing another dimensions. So bridging together different disciplines gives you opportunity to map it better and to see more dimensions. Also, working in trans or interdisciplinary team helps you to be creative with your findings, with your research. During the process of the study, we were in constant discussion with each other. Often it happened that scientists from one discipline couldn't really understand why certain findings were presented by the other. So we had to really clearly say and clear what we meant. So I think this kind of work supported our creativity and we were challenging for most of the time what is taken for granted in our disciplines. And for example, what I mean by that is in physical science, for example, what temperature means or what heat means is very easily described by, for example, few words like the power or relation of some physical forces. I'm not a physicist, so excuse me if I'm not describing it very clearly. But then from anthropological point of view, what heat is may be defined in various ways, depending on who is defining it and from which perspective it is being defined. And then we could jump into the discussion, and I will tell you a bit more about that. And now I hope you are still there, because I wanted to ask you, what opportunities do you see in such interdisciplinary, maybe not research, but collaboration, since I've heard that's one of the goals of your program. So if I could ask you to also say what are your thoughts about opportunities of interdisciplinary collaboration.
You can raise a hand or just start talking.
Yes, please just speak up.
So for me personally, your group is, let's say, not a slave to a certain perspective or a certain point of view. For example, if your team is purely engineering, you might create a great product from from the mechanical perspective, let's say, but hard to use for clients. So I would say that would be the main advantage that from my perspective.
Thanks. Any other ideas? It's not like there are good or bad answers. I'm just curious.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think that it also saves a lot of work, because when you're from one field and you're trying to research stuff from different fields that you may need in the project, it can be quite difficult and time consuming. And if you have an expert from somewhere else, then it's just your brains connect more quickly the information, and yeah, something that seems difficult for you can be easy for someone else. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. So, but what you just said, it may also have some, let's say, challenges, and let me use this opportunity to jump to challenges, if my screen works. Yes. So if we have many disciplines, it may happen sometimes that one discipline starts to dominate over the other. And what do I mean by that? For example, usually, like it happens that if you bring together quantitative and qualitative research in social sciences, so the survey and ethnography, the ethnography is used just as an anecdote or some kind of let's say illustration for the numbers collected from the survey, whereas our goal in the project was to treat the disciplines as equal, and sometimes it was not easy. Second, as you mentioned, we have different expertise, and sometimes it is super helpful to have someone who's an expert in climate science and not to have to count it by yourself if you're an ethnographer. But then what we encountered, we have different definitions of what valid data is. We had different data sets and different pace of analysis. So for example, if you work with numbers, most of the work you have to do is, maybe not most, but a lot of time you use is when you prepare your database and you prepare your model, and then you let your model run, and basically the analysis is done. And with ethnography, the process is much more time consuming, and not only the research itself is time consuming, but then analysis is also equally time consuming. And we encountered this kind of problem that one of the physical scientists in our team was very surprised. We, for example, after a few months after we finished our fieldwork, we still were analyzing our data, and they were surprised, what are we still doing with it? Why is it taking us so long? Or, for example, in ethnography or cultural studies, you do not use numbers to describe your data, and to count something from the physical perspective, you had to actually change the qualitative data into some kind of numbers. So we had to find some compromise between our disciplines, and I will give you just later some examples so you understand what do I mean by that. And lack of tools, what I mean by this is, for example, for quantitative part of our team, use of graphs or tables or numbers was very obvious and easy. But then when the anthropology part of our team started to look at the results they presented, we had to they had to clarify everything for us, because it was not obvious for us how to read this data. So it also requires a lot of explaining and talking to each other to really understand what our data is about. Also, it may happen that the same phenomenon has different interpretations depending on which scientist or which discipline is acquired. We have different scales of analysis, as I presented on this very simple graph at the beginning. And sometimes it's super interesting, but sometimes it's very hard to combine, because if we have the epidemiological analysis on the level of the whole country, and then very individual older adults from Warsaw, it may happen that these experiences doesn't match. For example, it's not real data, but epidemiology would say the most common, I don't know, factor causing overheating is obesity, and then I would have obese participant from ethnography who loves heat and summer, and then we would clash because our data give us different insights to the reality. And also the last challenge we encounter is publishing. Maybe it's not that interesting for you, but from academic point of view, it is very troubling, because the system of scientific journals is designed in a way that single disciplinary publications are mostly welcomed. So if we try to publish something that employs many disciplines, we often end up with weird reviews asking us to justify why we used this kind of methodologies, etc., etc. And here also I have similar question as before. So do you have any, or maybe you have encountered already during your workshop some challenges of this kind of interdisciplinary work?
Maybe it's not a problem in our group, but I think one of the biggest challenge in this kind of groups is finding right people, because I think it's necessary for person in such a group is to be open-minded, because like lack of understanding is really hard if people are not capable to talk about it and trying to learn from each other. So I think the like social skills are really important. So it's really hard to find such a people who, especially when there are more specialized in some categories, to find a place to learn, simply.
Yeah, that's true. And I think we are not taught about that in schools. So, but I think people who apply for trans or interdisciplinary projects, they are already kind of into discussions. So, but definitely you're right. And I just checked my watch that actually I do not have that much time already. So thank you for your answer, and I'm not bothering you with more questions. And I will try to shortly describe how did we do, how the process looked like. So the project lasted 3 years already, and the first year of our project we devoted to getting to know each other disciplines. And it meant reading papers from each other disciplines, explaining to each other what does it mean. And it was very surprising from both sides. Try to, as I said, understand. For me, I understand the graphs. For a physicist, it was hard to understand that you could have multiple definitions of heat or temperature, because for them it was very easily defined. And then after getting to know each discipline, we tried to find some transdisciplinary methodologies and somehow bridge our methodologies. And during this preparation, we organized a webinar with Andrea Nightingale, who is academic who also works transdisciplinary. And her advice for us was very, I think, inspiring, because she told us actually it's good to go back to single disciplines first to conduct research within the discipline, within the state of art for single discipline, and only after that try to talk to each other and look for convergences and divergences, because according to her, divergences are very often even more interesting than convergences of the data, because they tell us where we lack some data, where something, as I said, for example, if epidemiology say one thing and anthropology say the other thing, we can ask the question why, what happens, why these two methods give us different answers. So that was her advice to us, and we tried to keep it in our hearts. So we got back to our single disciplines for the research. Everyone did their research. And after we finished, we get back to analysis. And only then we tried to combine our findings, and we started publishing. Oh, okay. So analysis was done within one discipline and transdisciplinary. And we also started communicating our results, which is another whole story, how to communicate scientific findings, because it is very difficult, especially if we have transdisciplinary research, which is super complicated already. And then in the media, for example, we were asked to give very simple numerical answers. But since there is not very much time, let me give you one example of how we worked together on our results. And we worked on the paper called What is a Heat Wave? And our goal was to see how the heat is being defined by different disciplines and different people. So uczestnicy badania etnograficznego, these are research participants, and in the table there are marked days when they claimed it was too hot to them, and in the other rows you can see official alerts, and then climatic data from it's called WBGT. Generally, not to make it overcomplicated, you can see that different days over the summer were called a heat wave by different people or different disciplines. And also, we had to already compromise here, because according to the anthropology, actually, like counting or giving numerical value to anything is already not according to methodology. Like ethnography wouldn't make such a table, because every single experience is different. So we had to agree to somehow numerically value experiences of our participants to be able to convert it to the table and to see does it match with different disciplines. And my question is now to organizers of this webinar, can I speak a bit longer, or do you want me to finish now?
Yeah, of course, you can extend.
Okay, thanks. So I think the other example is sensors and ethnography. So I think that's the moment when we came the closest to the actual transdisciplinarity, because during our ethnography, when we were spending time with participants, we also employed sensors, as you can see on the picture. The sensors measured temperature and humidity, and also we used some smartwatch measuring body temperature and other values like heartbeat, etc. And I'm showing you this because this is actually the moment that we failed, and I think it's interesting because we imagined how much data we could use from this smartwatch sensor, and we wanted to combine it with individual experiences of participants, and they were asked to fill this calendar or diary that you can see on the left. So they were marking how they felt, and then we wanted to combine their individual feelings with the so-called objective measures of the smartwatch. But then when we already gathered this data and we tried to calculate something, we got to know from medical doctor and from physicists that actually the sample is too small, and it is not possible to draw any valuable conclusions out of 10 people's sample. And there were also some problems with calibration of the health sensors of the smartwatch. And for me, this was very good example to see that in the theory, you can design very interesting transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary research, but on the way, many things may fail, and that's also normal in the process. And the last example of a challenge in transdisciplinary research is city mapping. And here I want to show you the two maps of Madrid. On the left, there is a map, like the map that you would see on a Google or any paper map, cartographical map. And on the right, there is a map created through modeling, through climate modeling, and it was used also to epidemiological modeling. I'm not able to tell you what was the methodology of counting that, but if you try to put one picture on the other, you would see the shapes do not match at all. And it was really, let's say, I would say it was funny moment when we showed these maps to the ethnography participants from Madrid, and they couldn't understand why the city changed its shape. They were looking for the shape they're used to find their districts and the places they live to combine it, and they couldn't. And actually, we social scientists also couldn't really understand what happened. And our climate scientist friend obviously tried to tell us what happened, but I'm not sure how is it possible. But it's the matter of different ways of showing data and different ways of modeling, etc., etc. And I think, not to make it too long, I would skip the communicating the results, although it's also super interesting because it's further step and it also requires a lot of simplifying, because we are asked to communicate, for example, in 5-minute speech or 3-minute speech, something that took us 3 years, and we have like 9 scientists from different disciplines, and then having one result and communicating one result is super hard. So I just show you what we did with Josh, who's present here today, and it was real fun, and it shows different dimension of creativity. So we basically asked programmers and game developers to create some games on the research we provided, and it was already super challenging to me as a scientist to provide very simplified version of the of our results, and then it was even more transformed by creative people. So I think it's a whole different story about how to employ creative ways of presenting scientific research, but obviously we don't have time for that. So for the end, I wanted to just show you, because for this talk today, I asked my team colleagues to reflect on the process so far, what we've learned, what was the biggest challenge, and one of them said, interdisciplinary research is a great opportunity to learn about different approaches to answer the same question, and interesting new questions arise from the differences in our results. It is very effective in increasing critical thinking about our own methods and disciplines, and revisiting practices that we have taken for granted in our field. And the other one said, in our collaborative journey, we discussed bridging the gap between disciplines. Sorry, I can't see. But you probably read it, right? The most challenging aspect often revolves around communicating specialized jargon and methodologies. We have different definitions of what suitable data is. However, we've navigated these challenges by fostering open communication, mutual respect for each other's expertise, and developing interdisciplinary frameworks that allow us to integrate data-driven insights with a deep understanding of social dynamics, resulting in richer and more comprehensive solutions. So, to quickly sum up, we learned for sure that transdisciplinarity needs time, and to create like really transdisciplinary research, we would need more years to actually bridge and blend our disciplines. What we did is for sure interdisciplinary, but we're not sure if it's transdisciplinary. And there is still space for employing more and more methods, including creative ones. So thanks a lot for your attention, and I hope there are some questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Yeah, if anybody has any, please raise your hand or just unmute yourself. You know.
Do you have any questions or perhaps comments or your thoughts? If you want to share something, just unmute yourself, start talking.
If you come up with anything later, you can also reach us via our website, and there are our emails. So if, I don't know, later on during the process, you come up with any, you know, anything I could help you with, I would be happy.
I just have one question.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering whether you need to justify the fact that you put your work, that you put the title of work global warming, or I mean from the scientific perspective, do you need to justify it, or just assume that like the heat wave or like rising heat and global warming is so interconnected that there were no further explanation were needed?
No, of course we need to justify that, and it's actually pretty tricky to make it very clear scientifically, but there is evidence, and it comes from IPCC reports, that heat waves are the manifestation of climate change, but we obviously had to justify that, so it's not taken for granted.
And could you, of course, not in detail, but maybe like more abstractly explain to me like how may I do this, for example?
Could you repeat, please? I couldn't hear the last word.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was wondering if you can maybe more in abstract way or like in general way explain me the process, or how can I approach it if I had anything similar to.
How you could approach it?
Yes.
Like transdisciplinarity? Sorry, I'm trying to understand your question.
Yeah, sorry. Probably my internet connection is not.
No, it's fine. But I would have to know, like, what's your background is. So
yes. No. What I meant is, let's say that I had a similar problem, that I want to tackle an aspect of a general thing, like you tackle heat in terms of general global warming. And I was wondering, what is the general process behind justifying one with another?
Wow, that is very broad question, actually. And let me try. I think you just need to read a lot about the phenomenon, like, for example, climate change. So you read what are the manifestations of climate change, and then so it's more like first you learn about the general phenomenon you want to tackle, and you see what are the manifestations of it, and then you choose one rather than the other way around, that you choose some smaller thing and try to connect it with the bigger one. That's how I would approach that, if that answers the question.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I wanted to ask you, thanks a lot for the lecture. It's actually really nice that someone finally explains those three terms. What are the differences? Because you were right that people are using them very often as pretty the same, and they mean the same. I wanted to ask you what type of specialists were included in the project. You mentioned physicists, but did you have biologists, and like what were their majors and specialties? That is also interesting. What sort of disciplines you actually covered?
So we have ethnographers, sociologists, economists, physical scientists, physical engineer, cultural, cultural scientist. Let me check on my slides. Cultural scientist, epidemiologist, climate scientist, and that would be it. And then we consulted medical doctor and architects. And for sure, during the process, we realized we lacked psychologists for sure, and we could employ much more disciplines as well, but it would require even more time and more funding. So yeah, but thanks for asking.
But still, it's pretty impressive to get all those people working together.
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay, there's some comments. Okay, thanks.
Do we have any more questions? I'm just checking if there's anything on YouTube, but I think right now not. All right, in that case, thank you very much.
Thanks for inviting me, and I hope it was useful, at least.
As I think, as Paulina mentioned, it was really great to finally have those differences between the words that they are being used as synonyms oftentimes. It's great to see that and hear that being explained so clearly, and to hear about that being put in practice. And I'm sure the insights you provided today, they will be valuable for the participants. So thank you again. It's great having you.
So I'm leaving you, I guess, and enjoy your workshops. And I hope
Thank you so much for coming.